Thank you very much. As you mentioned, my presentation is all about sharing control. And we have in here just a few bits and pieces, kind of the same thing that we always see. And we're going to talk about essentially how we are asked to do a great deal, especially in education, with a very limited resource pool, and what that struggle looks like. And I'm just going to give you a wonderful example from just in the last 24 months what we went through. And then we're going to talk about the tools that we've implemented inside of St. Vrain to handle the tasks, the things that our teachers do on a day-to-day basis, to allow them fast and easy management of devices so a student can get back into the classroom as quickly as possible. And then I'm going to share some examples. Most of the things that I've implemented have been taken from the Jamf Nation community itself and made to adjust to match our needs and the specific issues that we face within our school district. But first I'm going to share with you that story. We're going to talk about our journey into Jamf and a little bit of a background information so that you can understand the context for the things that we've implemented within our environment. So St. Vrain Valley School District is a very large geographic, covers a very large area, just massive. It takes approximately 60 minutes to drive from one edge of our district to the other. And we have across this, and literally we have on each corner, schools, so it's always fun. But we have over 50 sites, over 50 schools that our techs support. And our centralized technology only has, right now, only 10 technicians to support all of these buildings, including our school administrations. What's not on this slide is what I'm going to just talk about very momentarily. So this distributed support model that we've implemented in St. Vrain came about very early. We've always run quite light in terms of the techs and available people we have in our building. And we needed some sort of way to make sure, as we implemented our one-to-one program, that our students got the support that they needed so that they could make sure that their focus was learning in the classroom and not waiting for IT to come by and fix something or waiting for something to be done, a device to be replaced or things like that. And so this distributed support model that we implemented has resulted in teaching and training approximately 200 school-level staff members on how to use on how to manage devices with MDM. And we originally wanted to spread this out because as students come up in schools, oftentimes they spend the same amount of time in that school and they don't really interface directly with our technology department. And so we felt that as we spread this across, that our schools would benefit more from having a very local, hands-on person in that building that is very familiar with the students and just basically what's going on at that school to provide that support. And so we've trained and we've implemented all of these things to allow them access to these tools, to empower them to be able to do these things. So as we carry on with the story, last year, early 2018, we were just starting our implementation of Jamf. We didn't make the cutover until June, so we had a little bit of time to kind of sort things out. But we were forced, it was a forced hand, and we had to move to our new system. So our previous MDM was going to be going end of life, and we were tasked with migrating to this new system, which in and of itself, migrating from one MDM to a new MDM is a daunting task all by its lonesome. And during this process, as we're working on this implementation and this migration plan in order to make sure our students can get back to school as quickly as possible in the fall, our district leadership decided to tell us that, hey, well, we're going to go ahead and refresh 22,000 devices. And so in our school district, we have a one-to-one program in our secondary. So every 6th grader through 12th grader has an iPad that we provide to them. And in our elementaries, we provide classroom sets, a set of 10 devices that are used and shared across those boards. And so this is a daunting task. You got a lot of targets you've got to hit. You got to figure these things out. The beauty is when you are refreshing all your devices, you can kind of say, oh, well, out with the old, and we can kind of move into the new, right? But I still had approximately 4,000 devices that I had to bring over into the new system. So if anybody's pulling their hair out yet, I guarantee I was at the time. Lots of things to do. And the biggest one, or the one I feel that has the most impact, is we had to figure out how to retrain these 200 individuals, these teachers, librarians, counselors, principals, anybody in our district that really wants to be a part of this program and help with the support of their devices. They have the capability, and we needed to figure out how to bring them into this new tool and do this with minimal disruption. These are the folks that were also going to be distributing all of these new iPads. So we had to carry this to a very poignant fact of, if we don't do this well, our students are going to have a bad time, and we're going to have a really kind of bad picture as we move into a brand new tool that has proven to be much more stable and reliable than our previous. And so, as you can imagine, there's a little bit of late nights, and as I said, this used to be much more, no, it didn't, but we essentially, you always wonder, right? You get asked to do these very specific tasks, these very daunting things, and put all of these little bits together. And it can take quite a toll on what you can do. And so we spent a lot of time. As I said, we had approximately 6 months after we knew what our new MDM was to sit down and do some planning around how we were going to move to Jamf from our previous system. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about what we lacked in our previous system and what we felt would make up for this huge deficit and give us the flexibility to answer those specific questions in ways that our schools would get behind. And so these are a few of the considerations that we went through. Our previous system had 0 APIs, absolutely nothing. The only way to interface with this system was to use the console. And it was an actual application that downloaded a local copy of the database and had all kinds of problems in there. And so we were really excited to move towards a system that had the flexibility and endpoints to be able to do what we felt could improve the experience of our students and staff. So because there were no APIs, a lot of our workflows required clicking on something, changing a value to not something else, and we had to do that in multiple systems. And so with Jamf and the API, we have this ability to turn it into a lot of automation. And we can now, because of this, we can also bring these things and we can bring our other systems together and present information such as when a request is submitted for, say, a lost to missing device, we can bring in the enrolled user, which is the student's name, and details about that student from our school information system. And we can bring it right into the window where previously it required going to another window, going to another location, grabbing that data and bringing it back over. And so these are very small distinction between the trust but verify and the trust and verify. Now we can present information and allow our schools to confirm that rather than risk the errors that happen between moving things. Now, this one's really interesting. As I said, our previous system, console only, no tools that we could really use, and it was a pretty extensive console. Training in our previous system took approximately anywhere from 4 to 8 hours per person. Now, a lot of these trainings were done in groups, but you can imagine the time sink, especially in education, that comes from having to support and do these and get people up to speed so that they could support their students. Now, our new system ended up being less than an hour. So we've essentially quartered the amount of time, and it's even less than that for all intents and purposes. It's now online, which means our teachers can do it at their leisure, anytime they want. So when somebody requests, and it could be requesting from home, they can get in and do the training. Then we're alerted, and we can provide them the access they need into the system. So a lot of this conversation here at the beginning is just some context. We at St. Vrain, we really do value our partnership with our schools. We believe that there isn't any group out there that knows their students better than the teachers and the staff and the administration that interface and work with them on a daily basis. And that's part of our mantra. We believe in enriching education. And so when your technology department has kind of such a school-centered mentality, you think about the bigger picture, and you have to realize that what you think may happen in a classroom, or even what may happen in a classroom previously when you were in school, is very different these days. And so we had to involve, and we wanted them to be a part of this, because anytime you give a tool to somebody, if you don't want to force it on them, you help make them a part of it. And so we also needed to do this just for the sheer amount of work. When you have one tech that supports 5 or 6 sites, they may not make it to that building for a few days. And we realized that as a one-to-one program, that kind of support was really not what we wanted to offer. And so we shared this out. And we can provide them with the tools and things that they need to do what is needed for their students. We also took some time to look at our technical side and what can we do on the back end to improve the experience for everyone. And automation is really kind of the key. Automate all the things, right? We have here a great community that has done a lot of this work and gives us a lot of ideas and ways to take the solutions that are provided for their problems and adapt them. And so that's most of what we're going to cover, is that how we've put together all of these different components using the API into this system that our schools have they really have enjoyed having this kind of light, useful tool to support their students. They very rarely, we could have got hundreds of tickets over a year for problems on our previous system that required a lot of intervention. Since we've gone to our website API approach, they're almost non-existent, and the system continues to prove itself day in and day out. So what we have is the name of our the name of our website that we use to manage devices. It's called Jamf Control, and it's literally just a web interface that allows our schools to work from wherever. Previous issue is our old MDM was also on-prem, so you couldn't do anything remotely. We didn't much like that. Our school admins didn't like that because that meant they didn't have the ability to report a device missing if necessary from home and those kinds of things. And so I'm going to cover basically a few of the features and things that we've put together for our system. As we work with our schools, we realize that communication is very important. So every time you visit this page, you essentially land at a communications place for us to share information. Talk about mass actions, and this is the asterisk there. It's just that this is updated. There were some things we liked in our previous MDM that didn't exist inside of Jamf, and we had to be creative in determining how we wanted to do that. Talk about contextual pieces, things that Jamf kind of really does already in terms of making sure that when you pull up that mass action, you do these things. And some of our own custom workflows that we've been able to implement directly into our own web page. So this is the very beginning. Every single support staff that shows up and logs into this system. It's presented with this just very kind of single pane that says, here's some details. And this was just built around our philosophy, the transparency and communication. We want our schools to be aware of the problems and things that they have. And so this is just a basic, rolling recent news, shows the last 10 items, places to secure or pin items for more details. And one of the other things that we really wanted that I have yet to see any product really do well, is we wanted a way to alert our users. If they're going to be in this system and say there's an outage or something that's affecting maybe the enrollment of devices, we want them to be able to see that and to be presented with that. And it used to be, we used to send it out in emails, and that was okay. But that's only okay as far as they've got their email open, and then they have to switch between tabs to even see that. So this allows us just to present this alert if we do happen to have problems, keeping our school support staff very informed at what's going on. So this is when you've selected a site, it's very much the same as Jamf. Each school, the devices end up at that location, and so for management, we use sites for our iPads. And so this view is made up of advanced searches that we've been able to define to help lay out a very consistent view no matter where these staff members go in order to support their students. When you select one of those advanced searches, you just get a big list. This is really no different than what you see inside of Jamf Pro, other than we can add some things and do parts that just Jamf Pro doesn't support. And so we could modify, we could add columns here, we could remove. These really just come from the display criteria that we put directly into our advanced searches. And then when you want to take action on multiple devices, on the left, you could check and you could select multiple devices, and then you have a following view here where you can take and do actual MDM actions or workflows that we've implemented into the system, along with a feedback. Did the server receive that particular command? As you know, if the iPad's offline, it doesn't make any difference. You can send it all day long. It'll just sit there. But as long as the server receives it and doesn't, complain at us, we can trust that the next time that device comes online, it'll do what it needs to. So this is a view of the device details. So similar to Jamf, when you pull up information, you can kind of see that it lands on the general tab and shows you a lot of the same information. Really no view different here other than you don't have to navigate through different tabs. You're allowed to see and we're able to bring in what's important. So something like installed applications in here originally didn't exist, and that was feedback from our schools, from our teachers who kind of wanted to be able to find and know what was on a device at a glance. And so we also capture and bring in data from our inventory systems and do those things. And we provide them the access to do the things that need to be done. Clear a passcode, update inventory, clear restrictions passcode. Now there's that clear screen time passcode. That's an interesting one because it's what it's called now. But anybody that remembers iOS 12 when it released, if you tried to clear the restrictions, it would essentially break screen time if that device had been updated. And so this is a custom workflow. It installs a configuration profile that disables screen time altogether, rather than just issuing an MDM command and then in a few minutes the profile will be pulled off and allow that device to set up screen time again. And that's kind of an extension of our temporary actions. So we took an idea that I found in an application called JAlly, where it's an iOS application for managing devices inside of Jamf. And the idea behind his philosophy was if you create these static groups and put them as exclusions to your configuration profiles that you want to. You can essentially use the API to add a device to that group, have it make the modification or install the profile or make the change that it needs to. And then we coupled this with our own task or automation server that periodically runs cron jobs. And so every 5 minutes, that static group or the static groups that we want to be emptied are just using the API, they're purged. And that causes all those devices to fall back out into the previous setting and carry on working. And that allows us to have this very stable environment no matter what tasks need to be done. We love output, we love logs, and I spend my day looking at these far too much, but we track all the output. Who did what, when, what were they doing, and so that we can use it for troubleshooting and identifying problems. You'd be surprised how many times somebody says, I can't get this to do what I need it to, and you pop in and they've been sending the command to the wrong device, or they've been issuing the wrong command. They've been thinking they're updating inventory, but they're just sending blank pushes all day long, and that's never going to get people to what they want. So this is a bit of a contextual. So this is a device from our elementary schools. And we have different workflows for elementary devices than we have for our secondary devices. This particular workflow allows our elementary school staff to enable app deletion, which is typically not turned on any of our elementary devices to prevent students from tapping on everything and disrupting a class. But sometimes somebody will create a web clip, or they have a need to troubleshoot and remove an application, and this provides that flexibility. And then we also have this ability to modify extension attributes. So app grade level is just a way for us to add an extension attribute value into the Jamf Pro record for that device to provide a different set of applications inside of self-service. And this is in addition to our other elementaries. This isn't, it could be a swap, but we tend to provide in our district everything we can to our schools. So they just have the tools that they need to instruct students. So this is a secondary device, just the device we were looking at before. So here I have remove VPN restrictions and remove elevated restrictions, which is the secondary level extension attribute that allows us to put restrictions profile on devices that is above and beyond our district's standard, so that our students can receive the attention that they need, and we can help make sure that they're focusing as they need to. This is an interesting one. Previously, in our system, it was really easy for our special education department to distribute applications to students that needed them or devices that needed them. This became a little bit more difficult in Jamf without really teaching this educator a whole lot of Jamf things about scoping and pieces, and generally it was a little daunting to figure out how to hand that off. And so we use the API again just to simply flag values, add extension attributes in order to make these applications available. And so this view, this one that you're looking at right now, this is a view for only people that have access to everything inside of Jamf. They can see all devices, they can see every location. Not every school is going to have the ability to scope and add applications like that. And so this has served our students very, very well for a very kind of simple way to approach and scope devices. So one of the last things, or not even the last thing, is I'm going to go over some of our own workflows. Now these are kind of simplified. They're very intricate or detailed as you can imagine. They're basically just long scripts, a whole lot of things. I kind of broke these down into some major points that we use. And so talk about how devices are enrolled and how we make sure that a device ends up at the appropriate location and what that looks like for our environment. With such a light staff, it's not the Wild West. Every school doesn't get to do what they want to do. It's very centrally managed. Talk about our missing process, like when a device gets reported missing, how that, what we do in those cases, and how Jamf has allowed us to automate almost all of that process, thereby eliminating errors and issues and just problems that come around a device that maybe still was in lost mode but had been returned but didn't get everything that it needed, and then shows up at the school and is still in lost mode, and the student now doesn't have a device to work. And then we're going to talk about how we've taken the API from Jamf, and we've taken the API from a lot of our systems just to generally improve our education offerings and as they come to device management. So some more context here. Our setup, every device is very centrally managed. Our entire one-to-one program is a district-funded program, and it's centrally managed, and we do that all with pretty much a single pre-stage for all 24,000 devices that we have in the wild. And just some context is we require authentication, but that's important. We want to know who has these devices, and we land them all in a single location. We create these little bottlenecks in order to make sure that everything that comes into our environment comes through a set of steps that are known steps. So anybody that's probably dealt with iPads that have probably gone home, you probably had that one student who went to the Apple store or went and took that device and then tried to bring it back, right? Got it replaced with a brand new one. No longer, they did take the asset tag and switched it onto the new iPad. But other than that, you know, it's an unknown device, and it's hard to be aware of. Apple doesn't provide ways to be aware of these additions to your system. With 24,000 devices, I can't do something like, oh, well, tell me about all these devices that enroll, and send me an email every time one enrolls. I like email, but not that much. And so we utilize advanced searches to organize our groups and organize devices into the things that we want to take actions on. And so right now we have a very specific handler for Apple TVs. We have one for iPads. When we move over to the Mac OS side, we have them for our laptops and those kinds of things. And then we pair this with a task server, an automation server that runs this website. We, on the back end, put these scripts in, schedule them to run. And every time you hear this, we do a batch approach. When we first came to Jamf, we weren't able to implement webhooks at the time. And so every time you hear me talk about, let's like group thing, you could do this with webhooks as well. You don't have to do that with batches. But I would recommend that if you are going to go the webhook route, while we haven't implemented it, we really do want to. It provides that immediate access or just-in-time configuration of the settings that we want. But webhooks only fire once. And when you're relying on a bunch of other systems, you're going to need something to kind of clean up just in case that other system comes down. So we reference our inventory system. If, say, for example, our inventory system's in maintenance and something goes through, that device is not going to get all the things that it needs to. And so webhooks are a great supplement, or a task server is maybe a great supplement to webhooks and allowing you to clean up and make sure that you're not letting devices fall through the cracks, which over time, as you can imagine, there's countless devices that will slip through. So this is our enrollment handler. As mentioned, all devices fall through this single location. We use the API to pull up that search. That search includes the values that we want to maybe compare or look for. So we don't have to make a second call into the actual full record when we do when necessary, but we try to avoid that just because we could have hundreds of devices enrolled in a very short period of time, and those kind of calls, while Jamf has performed great, are still things that we make sure we're conscious of and avoid. And so as we go through each of the devices within that come back from this advanced search. We look up information from our inventory system. What site is that supposed to be at? Does Jamf have the asset tag inside the system already? Or do I need to update Jamf so that I now have all the information and bring it into the system? And then we build our computer name, or we build our iPad name. And our standard is just site, and then the last name of the enrolled user, and then the asset tag. Obviously make sure it's very unique, and so that we can do that. And then we just simply move it. We adjust the site, we adjust this all in a single push to Jamf with the API. We just upload that updated record with all the details that we need to change. Doing this process and using this batch system, we're able to also do a lot of other things and implement even our own custom workflows. So that device that got replaced at the Apple Store that now shows up in our building and gets enrolled, well, that hasn't been inventoried. So when that machine comes in, I get an email that says, well, I don't have any inventory information for this iPad. You should probably look into that. And then you can start the process of figuring out what actually happened, which in a lot of cases is just the student went to Apple directly and Apple replaced it. And we can send these notifications to our tools, emails, things like that, Slack, any of the communication tools that you have out there. And this is how every device that comes into our inventory or comes into our management system goes through this little single pane of, hey, tell me some more about you so that I understand what I need to do and what settings you need to inherit from our system. So this one's nice and colorful. This is actually our missing workflow. And there's a lot on here. And the big takeaway here is that utilizing this website, we have this wonderful task of being able to automate these things. And so now, inside of that Jamf control system, when there's a need to report a device missing, they literally can pop in, click a few buttons, and I'll show you what that looks like a little bit later when on another slide, and start a process. And this is essentially, I know it's all colorful. I wanted to do something besides very sterile presentation piece, but this is essentially how we handle missing iPads and make sure that fees get assigned and the device gets reported missing and that we get it reported found when necessary too. And there's very few interactions that people have to take. Essentially, student tell a school admin goes in and reports it. This automated system does a whole bunch of things, all that in red. And then everything else that we do is very light and small in those capacities. I do have on there move pre-stage. iPad OS 13 is bringing enrollment customization. Once I have the ability to print these messages and present details about maybe the ownership of this device prior to enrollment, I have no reason to move devices from a pre-stage to one that has no authentication and do that. And so this is essentially, and it served us very well. So cross-system utilization. This is a tool that we implemented directly into our own service desk, or our own ticket system for, believe it or not, for all 24,000 iPads that I think are not site-owned in our system that are part of our program. We have 2 technicians that deal with the distribution and inventory of these devices, 2 that make trips out to our schools to make sure that their school has all the devices they need for their enrolled students, bringing back broken devices and taking out replacements and these kind of things. And they used to move systems, just like in our preview one, they used to move them in these different systems manually. And as you can imagine, over time, you start to see some differences. And we implemented this piece directly in here to allow devices to be moved within a single frame and to be moved within all of our systems. We can even add within here the ability to say clear extension attributes and process things and empty values out so that as a device comes back to stock that maybe was configured for a student that needed something very specific, We can make sure that as it comes back to stock, we can clear all those flags, and then next time it goes out of stock into a student's hand, it's a fresh device, able to be configured as they see fit at the time. And this is our missing, what inside of Jamf Control, what it looks like when you report a device missing. Kind of very straightforward. We provide details to know who presented or who marked the device missing. This just happens to be my name's all over this because it's also my iPad, and I also am in the process of reporting it missing. So, we follow a process, and this allows us to bring these systems together. We can bring information from our school information system, like our student numbers, so that we can utilize and have that information within our own work orders. And then we can also, in that little red box, I know it's kind of small, but this is actually really cool. Education, we have Apple IDs. We even have personal Apple IDs at our secondary level, but Apple IDs are only available for 13 plus. We needed a way for students that are under 13 that have iPads to be able to locate their device. And so we implemented from the Cisco Prime API, and with the wonderful help of our network team, they went through and named all of our access points. They added a value to them so that we could have some usable information in order to identify where a device may be in a building. And so with this is what it looks like when it's missing, but we also open that tool available to the student within Infinite Campus. They can actually log into Infinite Campus on their own, and they get access to this particular tool as well so that they can locate their iPad, all without needing it. So we essentially built our own Find My iPad for anything that's on our network. And this has been an incredible time saver. And this is just an example that APIs and learning what the tools that we have implemented and structured can do can allow us to bring together all kinds of great information and generally just improve everything that we do when we interface with our customers, whether they're students or staff. So this is essentially it. All we do is, as Jamf admins, essentially as any admin, is that our jobs are essentially finding the answers to very, very specific, unique requests, whether they come from top level, or in our case, they come from teachers and staff members who support devices. Feedback, as we value that. And I've spent a lot of time working with teachers and as we implement these tools, identifying what maybe needs to go. Do they want to search here? What are they missing? And listening to that feedback and implementing it. And that doesn't always mean that you say yes to everything that your teachers request. It just means that you listen and figure those pieces out. And that feedback is just super crucial to having a tool that is well received. The right tool for improved efficiency, right? You don't use a hammer to drive in a screw. You can, but your results are going to vary. And then lastly, most of this is just an opportunity to kind of share back to the Jamf Nation community some of the things that we've taken and implemented in hopes that it sparks some ideas and some opportunities to, as the first line says, to find that unique answer or that unique solution to the things that you're pressed for. And that's essentially it. I do have time. I do want to answer any questions if you happen to have any. But hopefully you all enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you, Edward. If anyone has questions, raise your hand. I can bring a microphone over. We got one in the back.
Hey, I guess this isn't really more of a technical question. It's more of a procedural one. How do you prevent students from wasting your time with frivolous lost mode requests? How do you know that the iPad is actually lost or stolen or whatever, and they didn't just leave it in their last class? And you get 20 of those a day. Yes,
it's a very good question. They all iPads that get reported missing, they all go through a school support staff. So students don't have the ability to report a device missing all on their own. They have to go talk to their librarian or whoever happens to be trained in that building in order to report that device missing. The beauty of the automation portion is I actually don't worry about the inundation anymore because the system will take care of itself. A device is reported missing, fine, go ahead. We'll lock it down. And when it gets reported found, it'll come back online. And it's worked really, really well. And so I don't even have to pay attention to those other than the tasks that have to be done that are still manual. So, but having that and automating those pieces has made that pretty much a non-issue.
Any other questions? Comments? All right, hearing none, we'll close it out. Thank you.